Welcome to Windsor Castle, where preparations are now being finalised for tomorrow's ceremonial funeral for His Royal Highness, the Duke of Edinburgh. All week, the tributes have been coming in, each one a mark of respect for the Duke and all that he achieved in a long life, each one a mark of sympathy for the royal family and especially for Her Majesty the Queen. Good evening. The past week, since the announcement of Prince Philip's death, has encouraged many to look again at the long life of the Duke, many things he achieved, the many causes he supported, and indeed the character of the man who was at the Queen's side for over 70 years. The Duke has been lying at rest in the private chapel here at Windsor Castle, from where he will be taken in a procession to St George's Chapel for the funeral service tomorrow afternoon. The preparations have been finalised over the past few days, and it goes without saying that because of the COVID restrictions, this funeral is a much reduced version of the one originally planned. Nonetheless, this smaller scale event was put together in full consultation with the Duke of Edinburgh in recent months. Now, over the course of the next hour, we'll be meeting people who knew Philip, some of those taking part tomorrow, and we'll be reflecting on his very long life of public service. The castle here, dominated by the round tower at Windsor. It's a gloriously sunny evening here on the eve of the funeral. The royal standard flying at full mast. The unmistakable sign that Her Majesty the Queen is in residence, as she has been indeed for most of the pandemic. And once again, the royal town of Windsor preparing to be in the full glare of the world's media. Well, my colleague JJ Chalmers, who's himself an Armed Forces veteran, is with us. He's on the long walk in Windsor Great Park to tell us a little more about the preparations.
Yes, Hugh, I've been down on the long walk throughout the day, actually. It's a mile-long drive that leads up to the castle itself, and it is a public space, and it's actually been very pleasant today. There's been people having picnics, children out on their scooters, and despite being told not to, some have been leaving flowers up at the Cambridge gates just behind me. Those flowers have been taken into the castle throughout the week, and there's now a sea of flowers in there, which the royal family have been able to see and have an understanding of the outpouring and support that has come from the general public. Things have started to change ever so slightly here. Barriers have been put in place because the King's Troop will process up here tomorrow with their guns in place. There will also be 700 Armed Forces military personnel. They're just forming up tomorrow about a stone's throw away from where I am. They won't make their way up the long walk. They'll come in through different routes, but some will make their way through the King George IV gates behind me. So it's very serene here, but there's also a sense that something momentous is about to happen.
Indeed, JJ, thank you. We'll talk to you a little later. JJ, on the long walk there, preparing for tomorrow's events. And with the eyes of the world on Windsor, it's important to underline that tomorrow, of course, in essence, is a service for a family in mourning, marking the loss of a much-loved husband, father, grandfather, and great-grandfather.
My dear Papa was a very special person who, I think above all else, would have been amazed by the reaction and the touching things that have been said about him. And from that point of view, we are, my family, deeply grateful.
It's very, very sad, but I have to say that the extraordinary tributes and the memories that everybody has had and been willing to share has been so fantastic.
didn't matter what anybody was doing in and around the estate here and everywhere else. They all meant a lot to him, and he always took a very personal interest in everything that they were doing.
We've lost almost the grandfather of the nation, and I feel very sorry and supportive of my mother, who's feeling it, I think, probably more than everybody else.
Some words there from the Duke's children on the loss of their father, and other family members have released statements in tribute over the past few days. The Princess Royal, Princess Anne, in a tribute to her father, said that it is his example of a life well lived and service freely given that I most want to emulate. We will miss him, but he leaves a legacy which can inspire us all. Princess Royal paying her tribute. The Duke of Cambridge, in his tribute, said this: "My grandfather's century of life was defined by service to his country and Commonwealth, to his wife and Queen, and to our family." And we also had some words from the Duke of Sussex, Prince Harry, who's returned to the UK from his new home in California. He said this: "Grandpa, thank you for your service, your dedication to Granny, and for always being yourself. You will be sorely missed, but always remembered by the nation and the world." So those are the words, that's the spirit of the event, and we'll have more tributes in the course of the next hour. And of course, when tomorrow's events happen, we'll be talking to more people who knew the Duke very well. But let's have our first guest now. Our veteran royal photographer, Arthur Edwards, is with us, and the royal commentator and journalist, Katie Nicholl. Good to have you both with us. Thank you very much. Well, the main focus, Katie, surely has to be really on Her Majesty the Queen. The fact that she's lost her consort, her husband of over 70 years. And despite all the ceremonial and the great events that we're looking ahead to tomorrow, that focus shouldn't be lost.
And I don't think it will be, Hugh, because I think what we're going to see tomorrow is essentially a family funeral. It is a royal ceremonial funeral, one step down from a state funeral. We know that. But it's also going to look very different to any other royal funeral that we've seen because of the situation that we are in. We know that ordinarily we'd have had a bigger congregation, we would have had procession through the streets of Windsor, which are now eerily quiet. But in many ways, one wonders if this might be the funeral the Duke secretly always wanted, one that was attended by his closest family, all of his grandchildren, a couple of his great-grandchildren, and, you know, the family that is his legacy. He was a family man at heart. He was quite a private man at heart as well, and I think this is going to be a fitting and fond farewell, and exactly the one that he wanted, down to the letter. He has had a meticulous hand in the planning of tomorrow's funeral, make no mistake. Indeed,
and having modified the plans because of the events of the past year as well, we should think, of course, about so many families around the UK and beyond who've had a really difficult year and who've lost loved ones, and in some cases are not even able to attend funerals. So in some sense, the more simple nature of the events tomorrow might be more appropriate given the context that we're in.
I think absolutely, but I think it is going to be a very difficult day, of course, for Her Majesty the Queen and all members of the Duke's family, but particularly with the social distancing, the needing to wear masks, that's going to be very, very hard.
Arthur, you've been at the top of your game for, what, over 40 years, and you've taken so many photographs, memorable photographs of the family. You know them as a unit. So my first question to you is, what will happen to this unit now that the father figure has left us?
Well, I think the Queen, as Katie was saying, I think she's going to be quite lonely now. I mean, this is not a great job being Queen anyway. It's a lonely life, but she had the Duke to confide in, and you know, and that's not there now. I mean, they did so many things together. They did the crossword together. They chatted every day together, and that's going to be difficult for her. But you know, they've got a great family. Prince of Wales will step up. The others will step up. All engagements now will be with another member of the royal family, and so she'll have the support. But she won't have that support from the Prince. I mean, I've watched him for years walk behind with the mayoress, not the mayor, and do the job brilliantly. But only when you went on an engagement with him on his own, he came to life. He sparkled, you know. He was funny, and that's what I'll miss. I'll miss those laughter when he cracked the jokes.
I can't imagine that the Duke was an easy person for you as photographers to deal with.
If I'd known every member of the royal family was going to be like him, I would have quit years ago, because he wasn't easy. I mean, I remember once we went to Dublin during that great visit with the Queen, and we went to the Guinness factory, and they poured the perfect pint of Guinness for him, and I thought, we're going to get a great picture here. And he looked at the Guinness, and he looked at me, and he smiled and walked away. And afterwards, I asked one of his staff, I said, why did he do that? He said, he doesn't like Guinness. As simple as that. He would never, ever, ever give you a picture if it didn't mean anything. Unlike other members of the royal family will try and help you, but he didn't. But then I did that last engagement with him here at Windsor in the quadrangle last July. And he was fantastic with the soldiers. I mean, he was 99 then, and he was just absolutely sparkling. And the press secretary said to us, it'll be 2 minutes or 20 minutes, and it was actually 30 minutes. And he was just absolutely brilliant. And I just, when he waved goodbye, I just suddenly felt that might be the last time I see him.
Yeah. Katie, when we think about the tensions in the family that are well known, funerals sometimes, for lots of families, are a means of bringing people together. Is that the case here, do you think?
Well, I think it is the hope that it will bring the family together. I mean, I think what you've seen in the past week is, yes, this is the royal family, but they are a family like every other in many ways. There are tensions, there are difficulties, and this is going to be the first time that they will have come together en masse like this since that Commonwealth Day service, which we all know was a pretty frosty reception, particularly between the brothers. But I think everyone is hoping that this is going to be an opportunity for the family to come together. They are going to be reunited in their grief, and of course the world is going to be watching tomorrow.
What are your thoughts on that, Arthur?
I don't think so. I think what was said in Oprah Winfrey's show is only a part of it. I mean, what went on here before with the brothers and the two wives, it's going to take a lot of healing, Hugh. I don't think it's going to happen just like that. It's going to take, maybe by the time they come back in July for the unveiling of Diana's statue, maybe they might have got together, but not this time.
You've enjoyed a long married life, haven't you?
I have indeed, and in fact, you know, it's when you get to this part of my life, and you will come to it as well, you start to think about losing your partner, you know, and it's kind of not a nice thing to think about. But you know, the Queen, I mean, no one to call her Lilibet anymore. It's the last person to call her Lilibet has died, and you know, her birthday next week. She's still in mourning, and there'll be no birthday card, no present from Philip, and that's the start of a long year, the first year. It's not going to be great for her, but you know, she'll pull through it. She's a fantastic lady. I remember at her mother's funeral, she was absolutely magnificent, and I think she'll be fine.
Yeah. You think that total dedication to duty and service, that won't change? It
won't change, and you will see that tomorrow. I mean, as Arthur said, she is a remarkably stoic person. She has her family. They are going to support her. They're going to be there for her, not just tomorrow, but as Arthur said, for the weeks and the months ahead. Yeah. And she has been through a lot, the Queen. The Duke was 99. He hadn't been well. He had his longest spell in hospital. He was there for a month. It was a long time. While this has come as a surprise, I think it was only going to be a matter of time. The Queen was ready, and I understand that she was incredibly grateful for the final weeks that they had together here at Windsor.
That's a very nice note on which to end the conversation with you both. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Katie and Arthur. Good to talk to you. Well, at the end of his tribute, Prince Harry used the motto per mare, per terram, by sea, by land, which of course is the Royal Marines motto. And that's a motto very familiar to my colleague, JJ Chalmers. Over to you.
Yes, once a Royal Marine, always a Royal Marine, Hugh. And for this Royal Marine, the Duke was my Captain General, a role he held for 64 years, but his military career started long before that. 13 years he served in the Royal Navy, including, of course, years of service in the Second World War. Ships took him from Scapa Flow all the way to Tokyo Bay. And, well, in the Mediterranean in particular, he saw his fair share of combat, earning a mention in dispatches at one point. And it was that unique insight into conflict and the realities of war that made him so uniquely placed when he took up service in honorary titles across the three armed forces. And for service personnel, it meant they had a unique respect for a remarkable man who had had a remarkable career. Well, all three services will be on parade tomorrow, and from them, many of the military bands will be represented as well. And I'm delighted to say that I'm joined by W1 Colin Buster Brown from the Royal Marines Band. You look like a man very poised and ready. What does your role entail tomorrow?
So, JJ, I'm the Corps Drum Major for the Royal Marines, and on a major ceremonial event, I will lead the Royal Marines Band on parade at the front of the band. So also on parade next to me I will have the Principal Director of Music, Lieutenant Colonel Jason Bircham, and so the Principal Director of Music, he oversees the musical aspect of the band, and then as the Drum Major it's my role and my job to ensure that the band are in the right place at the right time. For example, we step off at 13:56 and we have to be in position by 14:07, so it's my job to get the band in position at the correct time. Also, that I will deal with the drill and the ceremonial elements. So when I mean the drill, I mean the straight lines, making sure the guys are straight line front to rear and left to right. And currently, under COVID, we are now at 3 pace intervals, which is the 2 meters. And I know this is 2 meters because I know my pace is 75 centimeters, so 3 times 75. So I know we are at 2 meter intervals. So I will pace out the band and ensure that they keep at those distances throughout the ceremony.
Well, but very quickly, you've had a 28-year career. What does this day mean within that?
This day, it's the biggest. It's not necessarily the biggest event, I would say, but it's the most important for me. I think to be part of the ceremony, to be part of the funeral, it's hard to fathom. Prior to deployment, the band's deployed to start rehearsing on D+3. So on D+2 on Sunday, I went into HMS Collingwood and to get my lap flow test prior to deployment. And just going in there and seeing the Navy start their training and to watch that and to think how privileged and what an honour it is to be part of this major event. Well,
as a result, I thank you so much for your time then, because it really is remarkable. So best of luck tomorrow. Thank you very much, sir.
JJ, thank you very much, and to your guest as well. Of course, let's just underline, the Armed Forces will be playing a very significant part in tomorrow's ceremonial events and the processions. And we are delighted to welcome 2 of those very prominent figures taking part in the procession, Air Chief Marshal Sir Mike Wigston and the First Sea Lord, Admiral Tony Radakin. Thank you both very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Admiral, can I start with you, because we were talking there about the Royal Marines, and of course they're one prominent and distinguished group who'll be here tomorrow. Let's just explain a little to viewers about what the events of tomorrow are about in processional terms. How are the Armed Forces playing their role in all the events that happen before the funeral service?
Thank you. Well, really tomorrow is about reflecting all of the Armed Forces' relationship with Prince Philip. And it's the closeness of that relationship, whether that's the Royal Navy, the Royal Air Force and the British Army, and reflecting all of those different associations, and then us paying our respects to somebody that all of us loved, and he loved his associations with us, and doing that with immense respect, but also looking to reflect some of his character. And I think you're seeing that with the Land Rover Defender, and you're seeing that with some of the other aspects of tomorrow's service.
We'll be talking a little more about the stamp of the Duke, if you like, on the processions, and as you say, the Land Rover, we'll talk about that. Other elements too, and indeed his delight in engineering and design from a very young stage. So Mike, when we talk about the Duke's close bond with the armed forces, you know, it's a phrase that's used very regularly. It's used in almost a casual way.
Yes.
How did that manifest itself in your experience?
So in my experience, it manifested itself through his passion for aviation and technology, and his fascination with what the Royal Air Force did and the people in the Royal Air Force, and his real interest in every part of people's service and what we did around the world. And when he qualified as a pilot, of course, he had lots of opportunities and requirements to fly as part of his royal duties. So he took the opportunity to pilot himself and the royal family.
He was very keen.
He was,
Yeah.
he was.
There's lots of great footage of flights undertaken and clearly a lot of excitement involved as well.
Yes.
When we talk about his energy and his commitment, and then we talk as well about the fact that he took an interest in things. Again, they're phrases that, you know, just sound rather polite phrases. But the interest he took was very direct. And he maintained contact. He was very conscientious in that way.
Absolutely. And I think it's the consistency and the enduring nature of the relationship. So for us in the Royal Navy, it's this amazing tale of being evacuated from Greece in an orange crate in HMS Calypso. It's then going to Dartmouth and being the top cadet and also meeting Princess Elizabeth for the first time. Then it's a distinguished service in the war. And then it continues with this remarkable relationship. So he was Captain General of the Royal Marines for 64 years. Now that's before either of us were even born. Yeah. And then his final event was at Buckingham Palace, aged 96, again with the Royal Marines. And I think those bonds, that affection, the closeness is what you're hearing about this week. And it was very, very real.
Lord High Admiral, of course, as well, when the Queen decided to award that title. I mean, it's public recognition. There is also here, among the community in Windsor, a private recognition as well of the fact that the Duke was someone who really wanted to be integrated into all senses in the community. And that's something, I suppose, in terms of the armed forces community, that you've seen at a very close level.
Yes, yes, and at every level as well. I think one of the examples that comes to mind for me was in 1995 and 2006 we lost a Nimrod maritime patrol aircraft, and on both occasions he went out of his way in private to meet with the families and the loved ones, and at the worst moment in their lives he was there, and he took the trouble to be there. And I think that says it all about the depth of this man, Prince Philip, who cared passionately, but was curious and inquisitive and wanted to understand how things happened and how things worked.
I think those are lovely things for us to be focusing on the eve of the funeral. I'm going to ask you both a very difficult question because of your prominent roles in the procession. We're talking about an event that is scaled down from what was originally planned. We understand that and we understand the restrictions, and yet it will have a very solemn tone and will be very dignified and powerful, no question about it. You give us a little sense of what you think will be going through your mind when those processions take place.
So I think it's probably a mix of emotions. I think there is sadness, there is the need to reflect. I think there's a need to express dignity and respect and very much what would he have wanted. But I also, when I think of him, I think there's also that twinkle in his eye, that sense of fun. And for me, one of the final things will be a bugler and a call to action stations, which he would have remembered from his time in the Second World War. And I wonder what that signifies. Is that an emblem of his duty, this phenomenal duty, and how it continues all the way through? Is it something for the rest of us that now we go back to our stations and we crew our posts? And it's a very unusual thing to do. And is it also part of that humour of actually that he will have his character stamped on tomorrow and he's looking at everything?
I think it'll be memorable. It'll be an opportunity to honour a great life, honour Her Majesty the Queen as well, and an opportunity for all of the servicemen and women to show our thanks for a lifetime of service.
Well, can I thank you both for sharing your time with us and for explaining a little to viewers about what it's about. And we wish you well for the procession and the service tomorrow. Thank you both very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Well, it's fitting, of course, that we're here in Windsor, home to the Duke and the Queen for so many years, as it has been for monarchs for 1,000 years or more. And for many generations of royals, It's been a rather peaceful haven away from the bustle of central London. The royal family is at the heart of the Windsor community, as I've just mentioned, where everyone takes pride in the magnificent open space of Windsor Great Park, a marvel in itself. And for decades, the Duke had responsibility for the park and its wildlife. So we spoke to the deputy ranger who knew the Duke very well.
Windsor Great Park was originally a royal hunting forest. It can date its origins back nearly 1,000 years to William the Conqueror. The Duke of Edinburgh was appointed Ranger of the Great Park in 1952 by Her Majesty the Queen, and that's a role that he held for nearly 70 years. Huge areas of the estate are open to the public. Where we're stood now, by the Copper Horse looking down the Long Walk, is open. The majority of all our woodlands and forests are open as well.
George IV, believe it or not, would not allow anybody into the Great Park at all, not even his household. The only people he was prepared to see were his gamekeepers and his foresters and farm workers. Nobody else was allowed in.
The Duke was very much part of the community. I was very lucky to have 7 years working with him. He brought a great knowledge about land management and estate management to the table. He has overseen many of the key things that happened in the park, the replanting of the avenues, the reintroduction of the red deer into the deer park behind us. He has opened up huge areas of the Windsor estate to public access, and that will be one of his main legacies.
And we're delighted to share it with them. I mean, the community shares in it. They share the golf course and they can take their dogs for a walk and that sort of thing. And people come from all over to walk about in it. Good heavens, I mean, compared to most people, we're extremely fortunate to have any open space at all.
Whenever he was at Windsor, I would see him at least once a week. He would often appear at my office window when I was in the middle of a meeting with somebody, and he would just tap on the window. And you always knew it was the Duke because the person sat opposite you would go sheet white. And often he would walk in and sit down and join the meeting. He brought energy, fun, direction, and a real purpose to what we were doing. And if he was looking down on us now, he would probably do so from a point of quiet reflection and no fuss. But he'd be the first to come back to us and tell us to crack on.
Typically a positive and assertive message there. The Deputy Ranger talking to us, our thanks to him. With me now in the studio, Daily Mail writer and author Robert Hardman and the Royal Editor of the Sunday Times, Roy Anika, and it's lovely to have you both with us. Thank you very much. I know, Robert, from your case, you know, you've been in the position where you've filmed in the Great Park itself and seen the Duke at work in his capacity as Ranger. I'm just wondering, what did you get from that? What was the sense you got from that?
It was a wonderful day out here. He really was in his element. We went all over the estate. He was just so enthusiastic about everything. And you got this sense, I mean, in history, sometimes the Ranger of the Great Park, it was an honorary position and people didn't do much with it. From the moment the Queen made him Ranger, and it was one of the first things she did when she became Queen, he got to grips with it and he's totally transformed it. He's had every part of the estate, whether it's, you see the deer herd, there's even a vineyard over in the corner. He's very recently, his last installation was to put in grapevines, and he now makes sparkling white wine that's so good that the Queen serves it at state banquets. But I mean, all along the way, he was very concerned about the estate staff, how it interlinked with the community. So his farm shop, it sells stuff not just from this estate, but from all the other farms nearby. So yeah, he's very much, you know, the boss out there.
There was a lovely quote I saw from the Queen Mother from many years ago when she kind of commented that he was maybe taking the job a little too seriously because he was instigating all kinds of reforms, but just reflecting the fact again that he took it very seriously.
Yes, he did. He brought in, I mean, he would have very strong views on, for example, what sort of cattle were being used, what the milk yields were. At one point, he dabbled with yoghurt production. I don't think it was a huge success. One of his great disasters, and he was very frank about the things that didn't work, was a methane conversion plant, which was going to be fueled by the cows. It was early technology, and he just went, and then it blew up.
But just an example, Roy, I suppose, again, of the fact that we're talking about a man who did have the capacity to see quite far into the distance in the future and wasn't afraid of taking on ideas which other people at some stage thought were frankly rather batty. You know, at one point he was really talking about conservation in the way that very few other people were, sustainability. So really we shouldn't be surprised if tomorrow we see the service and other elements in tomorrow's processions reflecting all of that.
Well, that's absolutely right, Hugh. And doesn't that sound quite familiar in terms of the Prince of Wales as well? We've heard a lot recently about how that relationship, once quite fractured and distant, has mellowed. And Windsor has played a very great part in that, and Prince Philip's role as the park ranger, which of course he handed over to the Prince of Wales. I understand from people close to the Prince of Wales he's been spending much more time recently here with the Duke of Edinburgh, taking on that role, taking on the idea of sustainability and conservation. Of course, Prince Philip reintroduced red deer here in the 1970s. And, you know, we've heard the Prince of Wales say, people thought I was, you know, dotty back in the day. His father was way ahead of his time in conservation and the environment, and the Prince of Wales is taking that on, including here and on other royal estates like Sandringham. So will we see the Prince of Wales developing those ideas in an even more assertive way in future? I think he already has been, actually. I think from the royal estates and how pioneering Prince Philip was at Sandringham and here, as Robert's just been saying, we know that the Prince of Wales is not one to go slowly in terms of change, particularly when it comes to the environment and conservation. So he will take his father's programme that he started, he will take that baton and he'll run with it. And you know, what a great legacy for Prince Philip to have handed over to his son, and what a great way to improve that relationship in recent years. That word, legacy, it's such an important word. And yet, one of my favourite quotes from the Duke is him saying in an interview to some poor interviewer who had to ask questions, was basically saying, well, you know, you don't live your life trying to create a legacy. It's for other people to define what your legacy is. We can talk about legacy today, can't we? Because we can see what he's achieved, but he really wasn't keen on the thought that he was constructing a legacy. He just didn't want to answer that one. You know, he sort of winced when I said legacy. You could almost see it coming. He just said the word he used was he said it was indecent to think about a legacy. He said it's for others to think about my legacy. You know, when he was 50, he told an interviewer, he said, "I don't think I'll do anything that'll be remembered after I've gone." And I'm not bothered what's on my tombstone. And it's always been about, you know, I'll do these things, but it's for other people to make them work. I don't want any credit. But now we are all sitting around, and I think it's wonderful the way the world is waking up to the sheer span of all the things that he's done. Let's hold that thought for a second. We're talking about achievement. We're talking about honours and the way that people have been keen to really, you know, acknowledge what the Duke achieved over many years, because tomorrow's military procession and funeral service, well, they've been finalised very much in accordance with the Duke's own wishes, we know that, and he was involved in the detailed planning right down even to the selection of insignia displayed in the chapel for the funeral.
The Duke of Edinburgh had a very large collection of honours and decorations and awards. And we have a display of 9 cushions with up to 19 insignia chosen by the Duke of Edinburgh to be represented at his funeral. We will take them down to St George's Chapel and work with the Dean to pre-position them around the altar. The earliest ones are his wartime medals. A very fine collection of campaign medals, and those medals grew and grew over time. The bronze leaf is the mention in dispatches that the Duke of Edinburgh got from the Battle of Cape Matapan. He was the expert in terms of knowing how to wear something and what it should go with. The insignia represents the most incredible set of awards and recognition that somebody could achieve in a lifetime. Just a sense there of some of the things that we'll see tomorrow, and so that you as viewers can follow the service, and if you see the insignia, you will know that they've been selected by the Duke himself to be put on display. So yet again, another element of the Duke's focus on detail, to have this day really worked out right down to the last thing. And that's really typical of the man. When we look at
the scale of achievement. And it's not just down to being awarded honours, you know, the Order of the Thistle and the Garter and all the things we can talk about. It's also to do with the way that people understand the changes that the Duke was able to bring into force over the years. That he was someone who wanted to modernise the family. Because when, of course, he was married to the Queen in 1947, he really sensed that things needed to change. And they did.
They absolutely did, Hugh. And I think it's particularly interesting at the moment in terms of recent changes we've seen, members of the royal family stepping back or stepping away from royal duties, and us talking about modernising the royal family, how it needs to change. The Duke of Edinburgh was the great original disruptor back in the 1950s. You know, when he ultimately was someone who was there to support his wife, but he went into Buckingham Palace and wanted to change things around. He wanted to understand how the staff worked, how to make their lives better, how to become more efficient, how to make it leaner, a leaner machine. And he was doing that with huge amounts of resistance back in the day. And yet he carried on and he pioneered and he became known as this great moderniser all the way through to his 90s. And I think as much as he would have loathed us talking about his legacy, that is a lasting legacy, I think, of his work, right back from the 1950s.
Robert, can we help viewers a little more with the extent to which the Duke has really been immersed in the kind of detail that we'll see tomorrow? Because this is an interesting aspect for all of us, to be involved in planning one's own funeral and then to revise those plans because of the social restrictions that we have, and to really try to do something which is appropriate to the moment. That's really the thing. How did that happen? What was that process?
Well, he, like all members of the royal family, you know, he'd taken quite a keen interest in these things, and obviously was aware that everything was going to have to change because of COVID. And I think that as has been pointed out, I don't think he will be entirely sorry by the fact that it's going to be this very small personal service. I mean, there are lots of aspects of these current regulations that I think would quite have tickled him. I mean, for example, he loathed the noise of the aircraft that constantly come over Heathrow. He used to call it a bloody racket. Well, I mean, that's certainly been reduced. Yeah. And I think he didn't want a fuss, and it was I think tomorrow when we see the Land Rover arrive, I mean, it's so him. You know, here is this man who did so much for engineering and innovation. Yeah. And you know, just breaking the mould slightly, and always you know, never just accepting some tradition because it was a tradition. I mean, the tradition of the gun carriage, you could just see him going, well, why does it have to be that? Why can't it be something else? So it's covered in personal touches. And going back to the insignia we just saw there on the altar, I mean, those are that's just a microcosm of his achievement in sort of heraldic form, and they're wonderful. Some of these you've got the grander ones like the Garter and the Thistle, but there's you know, there are those war medals, those well-earned, properly earned war medals with the oak leaf on it. I mean, there's everything there, you know.
Just a final word at this point, Roy. I'm just thinking about the way that the events tomorrow will unfold. When viewers see 700 to 800 members of the armed forces, they might think, well, you know, how can you say there's no fuss, as the phrase is, if you have hundreds of members of the armed forces? I think the point to make is that the original plan was on a completely different scale.
Of course, the original plan would have seen an enormous procession, not only in London, but also here. And we would have seen a military procession actually marching through the streets of Windsor for the public to see. I think the military procession and the scale of that is really important. We're going to see the regiments with which he was very closely linked, the Royal Marines, the Grenadier Guards. That is what he would have wanted. That's what the monarch, as head of the armed forces, would want to pay tribute and honour him.
We'll talk to you tomorrow, but it's really good of you to come along tonight, and thank you very much, both of you. Thank you. Thank you. Well, as Robert was underlining there, the funeral, of course, has been put together within the current COVID restrictions. We're talking about a small congregation, around 30 people, very small choir, just 4 singers, and a lone piper who will play a lament at the most solemn moment in the service.
To be playing the pipes at the funeral for His Royal Highness is going to be the greatest honour of my life, probably, and my military career. So I'll walk from actually inside the chapel, strike up, play the tune, and then turn around and march and so that it's sort of giving the effect that the sound is drifting to the outdoors. On Friday, I got the phone call that he passed away, and then the preparations were made from there to come down to Windsor itself. I've got sort of a personal connection with the Duke of Edinburgh, particularly because I'm from the village of Braemar, which is close to Balmoral Castle. You know, and a lot of people in the village of Braemar itself sort of class the royals as their neighbours. So yeah, they all felt it when he passed away. One of my earliest memories of seeing the Duke was when he used to drive through the village, and he'd often give us a wave. That was when I was about 7 or 8 years old. It's deeply saddened me, and you know, my thoughts go out to all the royal family, and I'll be thinking about that on the day when I'm playing my tune as well in the chapel.
That was Pipe Major Peter Grant, who really does have a big responsibility tomorrow. And talking of responsibility, the two guests with JJ right now on the long walk certainly have plenty of things to think about. JJ?
Yes, there's about 700 military personnel nervously bullying their boots and polishing their buttons as we speak. So to get time with this two, the Garrison Sergeant Major Andy Stokes and the Commanding Officer of the King's Troop, Major Vicky Flood, is quite something. Sir, I think the answer is probably everything, but what are you in charge of tomorrow?
Well, up until this point, I've been responsible for, well, partly writing the plan based on the Duke of Edinburgh's wishes and ensuring that we've maintained the special relationship groups and all those that had a special affiliation with the Duke of Edinburgh. And for briefing and rehearsing every element of the military which is involved tomorrow. But tomorrow it's a huge privilege of mine to really be the military choreographer and to make sure that everything is exact, and that includes where people are stood and the timings. The timings are incredibly important tomorrow. And during the actual procession, I shall be controlling the pace of the Land Rover hearse because it's important we meet the right time.
What is the key, sir? What's the thing that's going to keep you up the most tonight?
Well, nothing at the moment because I always believe that, you know, we should rehearse and we owe it to the Duke of Edinburgh tomorrow to give the most special, dignified, poignant display of what he would expect, and he'll, you know, I'm sure he will love the fact that everything is designed to the last second for tomorrow. So hopefully nothing, because we've rehearsed, and the military are on point to do the most dignified event or funeral procession that they could possibly do for His Royal Highness.
You've met him, or you met him several times throughout his life and your time in service. What are your lasting memories?
I think his ability to put people at ease when he's speaking to them, and his incredible sense of humour. And me and my partner Sue would, whenever we met him, he would quite often ignore me and go straight to Sue and say something to put her at ease, like, you know, how do you put up with him, or something like that. And that sort of, those comments break the ice and just allow people to be at one and be normal with the Duke. It was great. He had an incredible gift.
Ma'am, how do you prepare for something like this?
Well, the King's Troop, Royal Horse Artillery, we're constantly practicing and preparing. We're constantly held at readiness for such an event. So we are doing our practice twice a week, every week, for most of the year. So when something like this does happen, I have every confidence that the soldiers and the horses are prepared to the correct degree that will be expected of them.
And Mum, you met the Duke as well. That's right, isn't it? Well, can you tell me about that experience quickly?
And so before I joined the army, I worked for the Queen in the Royal Mews and riding and driving the ceremonial horses. And one of the roles we had was driving the carriages to Royal Ascot. And one year I had the Duke in the carriage, and I had a horse that was quite overwhelmed by all the flag waving and all the young children screaming on the streets on the way into Royal Ascot. And the horse just misbehaved, unfortunately, all the way there. And when the Duke got out of the carriage, being a carriage man, came up to me and commented on the horse and said to me how well I had dealt with it. So coming from him, it meant a great deal.
Wow. Well, I hope the horses are well behaved tomorrow, as are our servicemen and women. Thank you so much for your time, and best of luck with the last of the preparations.
JJ, many thanks, and of course 2 very busy guests there, and our thanks to them too for talking to us. Not only did the Duke want no fuss, as I mentioned earlier, though of course that's rather difficult when we're talking about the longest serving royal consort in British history, but as we've heard, he was very specific about the details, even the mode of transporting his coffin. And the choice of a specially modified military Land Rover, it's been mentioned a few times, but this is the explanation for you, makes a clear and powerful statement about the Duke's lifelong attachment to the armed forces and indeed to life outdoors.
Everything that wasn't invented by God was invented by an engineer.
How does a lifelong supporter of innovation make his final journey? With full royal ceremony? Or in a Defender TD5, built in 2003 and redesigned to the Duke's specification, customised over the next 18 years, maintained by Land Rover, standing by for this one last journey?
Engineering was always close to the forefront of his mind. Innovation was always close to the forefront of his mind. It's not surprising that he would choose a traditional piece of engineering to typify his life.
The utilitarian four-wheel drive rover of the land was launched soon after the war. It immediately appealed to the Duke, chiming with his mission to promote innovation and design, a fascination going back to his earliest days in the Royal Navy.
We've got to make the best use of the skill and the brains of the people, and we know perfectly well that the people in this country have got a remarkable talent for things if they learn how to do them. We ought to make the best use of that.
This was no lofty view of the world of engineering. The Duke rolled up his sleeves and got fully stuck in, and sometimes into the engineering establishment itself.
Some of you may have seen reports of an article which I wrote recently for the Engineer. Some of you may even have read it. I'm surprised, not to say flattered, that some of those critics actually bothered to read the article in the first place.
We've lost a champion of British engineering, and we've lost someone who was keen to promote engineering and inspire younger engineers and innovators to really create the future.
This old friend, this secret little project of his, will take the Duke to his grave. It's not entirely a new idea. His relatives Lord Mountbatten and Lord Snowdon also made some of their final journeys by bespoke hearse. But the hands-on conversion of this no-nonsense vehicle somehow says so much more about the Duke of Edinburgh, engineer, to his very end.
My colleague Eddie Butler there talking about the Duke and his keenness on engineering and design and innovation. So with all of that in mind, let me welcome my next two guests, Professor Dame Anne Dowling, pioneer in the engineering world. Good to have you with us, Anne. And also Zoe Wanamaker, the actor, of course, and Zoe, great to have you with us as well. Thank you so much. Anne, can I start by asking you, really coming on that quotation which I love, which is the Duke saying, if it wasn't invented by God, it was invented by an engineer, which kind of opens us up into a world of his focus on engineering, and I think his frustration that maybe, you know, the United Kingdom hadn't maintained that tradition in the way that it should have done. What was your experience of his enthusiasm in this area?
He was just so enthusiastic about engineering, and I suppose I first met him as a young researcher, and because he visited Cambridge University where he was Chancellor, and we talk about my research, which was on aircraft noise, and we really gelled on it because he's a pilot, loved flying. I worked on aircraft, but I also flew myself. And as he pointed out, Windsor Castle's under the flight path to Heathrow, exactly. So aircraft noise was something that was very much in his attention. But he was just so engaged with engineering. And as you heard there, really saw engineering as a way of generating wealth for the country. And was a strong push to pull engineers together. Well, actually, it was his instigation that led to the establishment of the Royal Academy of Engineering. Yeah. You heard Sir John Parker talking there, a former president, as am I, a former president of the Academy. And there's now such a momentum around engineering, and Prince Philip really knocked heads together and made things happen.
Not just engineering, Zoe, because let's talk about your family's experience. Your father, certainly Sam Wanamaker. When we think about the incredible restoration of the Globe Theatre, which happened over many years, well, how did that work out, and how does that relationship work out? What are your memories of that?
Well, I was just starting work at the time, so this was a passion of Dad's since the 60s, late 60s, and as far as I can remember, Prince Philip got involved in 73, right, I think, and was passionate about the idea of the Globe. And I think the reason they got on, Sam Wanamaker, my father, got on so well with him because they're tenacious people, don't you think?
Yes, yes.
Wanted to make things happen.
Exactly, and he was very, very passionate about the Globe, and also donated some Windsor oak which was great, and then that started. So that was, and the idea of I think, building something of the materials that were used at the time, wattle and daub, and the thatch, the first thatch building to be built since I don't know when.
Which in its own way is innovative, given when it was done. Yes.
But he was passionate also about the youth, the Globe's educational side. So he was always there for that. He was not just a fake patron. Do you understand what I'm saying?
No. What I love about the Globe project is that it is about design, but it's such a magical concept that brings together culture, education, you know, the arts generally. It just fuses everything together, and it's a really good example of what the Duke was delighted in.
I know, but he just said it. I think the last thing he said about when he opened the Sam Wanamaker Playhouse, he said, "I'm not going to see it because I'm not sitting in those bloody uncomfortable seats you've got," which was sweet. But he was always enthusiastic and always there. Which was a wonderful thing.
When we're quite wary of talking about legacy, Anne, because the Duke himself didn't like to talk about legacy. But I think we're entitled to, really, on the eve of the funeral. In the world of engineering and innovation, what would you say about his legacy in this area?
I think his legacy has been to really raise the profile of engineering. He was a very hands-on patron. He was the founding fellow of the Royal Academy of Engineering and our senior fellow. And that really has gone from strength to strength. It's around catalysing engineers across all disciplines to work together for the good of the country. And again, bringing in young people, promoting innovation, and having a senior body of engineers who provide advice to government and influence policy. So I think that's been a tremendous legacy. But across engineering, there have been so many initiatives that have been around innovation, training young people, celebrating successes. And he's been very hands-on in all of that.
Just in a sentence, I suppose, given your experience, what would you say? What would you say about a legacy, given that we've been talking about culture and the arts and the Globe? How would you describe the legacy as it's currently seen?
Sorry, I don't know. It's giving back. It's giving back and hoping that the younger generation take this on and carry it on. And that's all you can do. It's hand to hand. Pass it on. And I think that's where he was so incredible. Because he, as you said, he wasn't just a sitting around patron. He was full on, and I think that's the same with the Globe.
Very much. It's lovely to talk to you both. Thank you very much, Anne and Zoe. It's lovely to have you with us. Thank you very much. Indeed. Well, by the time the Duke retired from public duties back in 2017, he'd conducted over 22,000 royal engagements as the Queen's consort. Many of these were to do with his own interests and causes, and we've been discussing them there with Anne and Zoe. But, of course, major legacy to the UK and the Commonwealth, a legacy sustained by his children and grandchildren.
The challenge is actually trying to keep up with him. And there's always been the range of interests that he had and the range of organisations that he supported. I mean, we're all staggered and amazed by the amount that he has managed to pack into his life. Absolutely phenomenal.
He was a strong character. He didn't suffer fools gladly. So if you said anything, you know, that was in any way ambiguous, he'd say, well, make up your mind, you know. It made one choose your words carefully, if you know what I mean.
Some people might find this rather strange, but I would describe him as remarkably tolerant. Everybody would assume that he has very strong ideas and opinions, but he treated everybody as an individual and gave them the respect that he felt that they were due as individuals.
It's so difficult to be able to put a legacy on somebody like that because he's been in society, for society, with society, alongside the Queen for so many years.
He read a fantastic amount of articles, books, But he also wrote a lot on those subjects which he felt didn't have enough profile within society and within their own professions. And very keen observer of what really made a difference.
He's been a huge support to my mama for all those years. He was always there on the tours and everything else. I mean, I know he helped with speeches and things like that, but he clearly did give an enormous amount of moral support, which you need.
There were so many things that he ended up getting involved with, and it changes through his life. You know, different things come to the fore.
But those that carry his name, whether it is the Prince Philip Trophy or the Duke of Edinburgh's award, or those are the ones that I think will continue to live on in his memory.
And I think that we're all immensely grateful to him for that care, that interest, that inspiration, that guidance that he's given.
I mean, he'd be remembered, I think, in a number of different ways and places. But all of them, I think he always had a long-term view. And really keen to get people not to be short-termist and convenient. That it's hard work, but you do have to plan for the long term because this planet is going to last a bit longer than us.
I think he'd be remembered for being a wonderfully supportive, active, energetic individual who had his own mind about a lot of things. I think he'd probably want to be remembered as as an individual in his own right, really.
A lovely warmth in some of those tributes. Let's talk a little more about that with the royal biographer and friend of the Duke, Giles Brandreth, and the Sunday Times royal editor, Roy Nika, who's kindly joined us once again in the studio. Giles, the first thing I want to ask is something about the man that you knew. Before we talk about legacies or anything like that, what have we lost?
Oh, we've lost the most remarkable human being. I mean, I don't think I've ever known anyone with so much energy and such a wide range of interests. He was funny, he was brilliant, he was proactive, he made things happen. The bits of tonight's show he'd have loved the most, your last two guests, he loved Sam Wanamaker, he was thrilled to help make the Globe happen. There was somebody who made things happen. Yeah. And engineering, the reason that the Dame has the Order of Merit is because he thought this is a woman who makes a difference. Yeah. He just made things happen. But the truth is, he said something to me once, because I was saying, your real role has been to support the Queen. And of course, that's his legacy. That's his real legacy. If we regard the Queen's reign as a success, and most people do, the joint author of that success is the Queen. And I said to him, it's amazing. You've done this for 70 years. You haven't put a foot wrong. You may have occasionally put your foot in your mouth elsewhere, but when you're with the Queen, you always got it right. Turned up on the right day, in the right place, in the right uniform. And then he said something quite interesting to me, but the Queen has also given me something. And I thought, I don't often hear you saying this. And he said two things, really. One, a home. I said, really? He said, I was a refugee prince. And his first home as an adult was with Princess Elizabeth. The only home he ever had as an adult was with the Queen, and she gave him that. And he also said, she gave me the opportunity to do all this. I've had the most privileged life, being able to do all these things. It's thanks to the role I found myself in. And so I've been very lucky.
Those are the themes, surely, that people need to bear in mind when we see tomorrow's events happening, Roya.
And I'm sure they will, because as Giles said, we've lost an incredible human being who did a lot of very interesting things, but the Queen has also lost her sounding board, her liege man of life and limb, the person who she turned to. Someone, a former royal aide yesterday was saying that, today actually, Sally Osman, they've lost their family leader. He was the leader of the family, and I think the fact that we're going to see a very small family funeral will be very poignant. The other thing in terms of legacy, and we were talking earlier with Robert about how Prince Philip was not one to make a faff and a fuss about, what he left behind and all the great things he did. He didn't bang the drum on what he achieved. His other great legacy is, of course, his family. The Prince of Wales, in terms of his interest in conservation, the environment, the Duke of Cambridge, very interested in that as well, Prince Harry. So I think in terms of legacy, that is something that we will see his family continue to take forward.
He is the maker of the modern royal family. All the interests of his children are his interests, whether it's mental health, the environment, young people, whatever it is. It's actually what he inspired the royal family. He pushed it to where it is now. So tomorrow, I think, as we watch this funeral, we will feel gratitude that we had this extraordinary person, Prince Consort in all but name, for 70 years, and we'll feel for the Queen. I came across today something that she wrote 20 years ago, exactly 20 years ago, at the time of 9/11. She sent a message to the American people, and it ended with a quite personal note, which is unusual for messages from the Queen. And it simply ended up, after having expressed her condolences, she said, "Grief is the price we pay for love." And so she will be sad, but she will continue doing her duty, as for more than 70 years he did his.
Giles and Roy, thank you so much for the contributions, and we'll talk again tomorrow, I'm sure. Thank you very much. So we look ahead to tomorrow's events here at Windsor, not that state funeral for His Royal Highness, Duke of Edinburgh, but a ceremonial royal funeral devised in accordance with the Duke's own wishes. And that's the spirit in which tomorrow's events must be seen, marking a loss, yes, but celebrating a long and eventful life. So do join us tomorrow at 12:30 on BBC One. But for now, from all of the team here at Windsor Castle, thank you for watching and goodbye.
We do go through life trying to make a legacy. I think to try and create a memorial to yourself while you're alive is slightly indecent. I'd rather other people decided what legacy I'd leave, and I'm not trying to create one. I mean, life's going to go on after me. If I can make life marginally more tolerable for people who come afterwards, or even at the time, I'd be delighted.